And Jill swearing. Well, hello there, everybody out there in the world. How are you today? I'm Danny Henderson, spiritualtherapist.com. And the lovely lady in the screen is my friend from New Zealand, and her name is Gloria Masters. Now, as much as we're smiling at this introduction, I have to say to you, I cannot emphasize the very strict warning. You have to use your discretion. You're going to hear some really horrendous, awful, dreadful informations, things that this lady went through as a little person, as a much younger person. I would urge you, if you have children in the room with you, please do not allow them to listen to this. It is extremely disturbing. So don't be selfish, put your headphones in or watch it later. Children do not need to hear what this little child went through. All right. I'm so happy to introduce you, my friend, darling Gloria Masters. And it's so good to have you back. It's been months to get back together like this and to speak about your book of healing that you're bringing. I'm just going to hand the floor over to you so you can give the audience some of the journey that has brought you to this moment.
Oh, thanks, Danny. Big heart for you, my friend. Thank you. Hey, everyone. Look, my story is not a simple one. It was fairly traumatic for me, and that's understating it. So for 16 years, I was born into a family where child rhymes with X. Transporting was a feature. And so what that meant for me was I was groomed and trained from a very young age on how to perform and please the men who would be prepared to pay a significant amount of money to hurt, rhymes with ape, and significantly impact a small young child. My father consequently made a lot of money out of me, and I was also leased out of a nightclub in our red light district. Chains were used, and men would come in one after the other, and again pay a lot of money for that. Privilege is not the right word, Danny, but for that opportunity.
And how old were you?
Oh, from the age of 11, I was leased out of that nightclub. On weekends when I saw my father, I was, because I had to live with him for 18 months, which was the worst time of my life, between 11 and 12 and a half. So I would be leased to gangs, and there they could use me for initiation ceremonies. And so the rhyme with ape and torture that went on there is almost indescribable. And I can still have flashbacks about one particular evening with the gang. I was so badly beaten and brutalized, I was unrecognizable. My eyes were closed from the puff. You couldn't see my eyes. So these were grown men who willingly chose to do that to me. I also star in, if you can call it star in, feature in well over 100 adult type movies, and the police tell me they are possibly in the United States. So this is not designed to shock, but what it is designed to do, Danny, is to show your beautiful survivors watching that there is hope, and that if someone who went through that amount of torture, debasement and cruelty can survive and heal and be able to give back, then beautiful survivors, I believe you can too.
You know, it's just so harrowing. We hear these things and rarely do we meet a survivor such as yourself, and the horrific cruelty and the torture and the torment, and you know, imagining grown men who are what, you know, torpedoes. They have to grape a tiny little child, a child who isn't even developed. And you were tied, chained down to a slab. Can you tell us about that, please? Guys, again, this is a really graphic part of the interview.
Yeah. And look, so they tied me to, this is the gang, they tied me to four corners of a table. It was just boards put out over beer barrels back in the day. And so what that meant was I was on the block. So I was tied to that, chained to that. But there were also occasions from the nightclub I was leased out of where they thought it would be fun to chain me to the bedposts. So we're talking big, thick, heavy chains locked and chained there. So yeah, look, I'm grateful to be alive, and I'm not underestimating the impact or the damage that occurred, Denny. I guess I'm saying it's taken me decades and I'm quite a different person now, but there's something big in me about wanting to help others by shining light on this so that they too can find a way forward. And I guess that's my purpose in life now. Yeah.
Just amazing, amazing. And you were groomed and trained by family members, like by your mother.
No, my close Danny, by his mother, my father's mother. And actually not just my grandmother, but one of my aunties. Now get this, they were paid a commission. So if you can appreciate, I saw money changing hands. The better they had me perform, the more they had me perform, the more money could be made, you see, and the more that could be added to my repertoire of grape performance and child X transporting, the ka-ching. So we're talking a great deal of money here. And I could there's an image of me actually standing with my grandmother, and you can see this amazing 11-year-old girl posing like a person who earns money to provide X.
So they presented you as a hooker, a little tiny 11-year-old baby girl as a hooker.
Undernourished, and I was starved as well, and the reason they starved me was to keep me as thin and underweight as possible, because then I would look young, you see, for the
torpedoes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, oh my God. And this gang thing, the initiations, this again, once you've initiated and you've violently raped a little child, a little baby girl, they do it to little boys too, then they're blackmailed forever. They're on, but a lot of the men like it. There are more torpedoes out there than we realize, the electric chair and castration and worse for you all. And again, your family members, they're not in prison. They weren't hung. They're alive somehow.
Well, and Denny, unfortunately, and I don't think it'll surprise you or your audience too much, but what happened to me was I was completely shut down and darvoed. And darvoed means deny, accuse, reverse the order of victim and offender. And for people like me that come forward to try and share their truth, that's what happens. So no, it never happened. Attack my credibility, my sanity, my state of mind. So when I was in my 30s, I first came forward to the family with this, and they started to attack by, you might can play tricks, or I don't know, I don't believe that would ever have happened, or no, he was a really good dad. So you see how you're attacked, and then the order becomes reversed, and so I become the person that's causing everyone pain. So for a survivor, what happens is that's our impression of what happens if we finally find the courage to share the truth. And why would you ever speak out again? So that's what happened to me. And so no, the police did an investigation, and unfortunately all the family apart from me said no, nothing ever happened. And she's always been the troublemaker. So
keep your soulless evil. The pornographic films, over 100 pornographic films with other little tiny ones,
and men and women, and just the debasement. I'll never forget, I can never look or listen to the sound of the old-fashioned projectors with the wheel turning and the sound of the whirring. You might be a bit young for it, Danny.
No, I'm not. I remember it.
That's how they used to make those movies. And so they were on big reels, which they'd put in big leather cases. And that's what was sold and shipped. And so whether or not that got changed into video footage, I'm not sure, but yeah.
Goodness me. Did you ever meet any of the children that you were forced to make these movies with in your daytime life?
Not that, or maybe one or two. And I'm hoping that as time progresses and New Zealand shows some interest in this, that, you know, I may get to meet them or reconnect. My understanding is, especially for those beautiful young boys, that suicide is more likely to have been an option.
And it's so true. The suicide rate in this abuse is just beyond. This is such a difficult subject to cover. And this is our second broadcast together. And you and I definitely bonded in the heart, as we know. It's remarkable. You're remarkable. And I just admire you so much for sharing such dreadful details. And again, the invitation for others to say, listen, it's all right. If this happened to you, you get to speak up and speak out. And the more people that do that in this regard in particular, they find each other. There's survivors finding survivors who give each other guidance. Can we talk about your first book and then move on to your new book that will help other survivors, please?
Oh, Danny, you're such a gift.
You're the gift.
No, you. So look, the first book is a memoir, and I published that last year, and that's On Angel's Wings, my flight from trauma to grace. I've actually got it here in case you asked.
Beautiful. So hold it
there. The light coming out. Yeah.
So On Angel's Wings by Gloria Masters.
Yeah, sorry, it's a bit.
Can't see your name yet.
Yeah.
There you go.
And then my flight from trauma to grace. Just before I came on, Danny, there were some orbs behind me. So you were here without even realizing it. But that is a shocking read. That is traumatizing. But it is truth. And I released it to kind of highlight what happens across the world, and that it does happen, and that things like satanic ritual abuse, things like, oh, sorry, I just said that, things like child X transporting do occur, and it's not new. It's not new. So that this book was released, and it's horror. But it was just a real kind of a look into the life of a child who had experienced 16 years of psychological, physical, and actual trauma.
And the psychological abuse, you know, and never mind the physical abuse of every orifice in your little tiny body. Your father was in particular there isn't a word to classify his level of evil, and he made you eat out of bowls on the floor and just...
Oh no, that was a luxury, Danny. I had to eat off the floor like a dog without using hands. So he would put a dog collar around my neck. I would have to be naked. I would have to be on all fours. And he would drag me around the house, and I could only communicate through dog sounds. So howling, whining, barking, panting, begging, I could only communicate through that. So that was a fun game for he and my brother when I was left in that house for 18 months with them. So, you know, dehumanizing, debasing, and even then, you know, I managed to find a light. I just found a light inside, and I just followed that light.
So beautiful. You're so strong. You really are. And there just isn't enough, you know, sorries and anything for what you've been through, but you are the light within the darkness. You are an angelic force. You truly are. And this is what you have brought to the masses. And this is what makes me so happy, even though the content is so dreadful, to bring you, you know, on my small but mighty channel, so that other people can have access to you, to your brilliance, to your grace, to your information. Shall we move on to the Survivors guidebook, help book?
Yeah, okay. Would you like a little reveal?
Indeed.
Ta-da! So again, this is Gloria Masters' Flight Path to Healing, and it's a guide for child sexual abuse survivors. By the way, both these books can be purchased either gloriamasters.com or on Amazon. But this guide was written from one survivor to another. And basically, Danny, it encompasses, you know, 4 key themes, really. One, the impact child sexual abuse has on us as survivors, and I categorize them into areas. 2, the ways that we can start to work with those. So I've got practical exercises, I've got beautiful mantras in the book actually they're perforated, they can be removed. Look at that. So that's a thick cardboard mantra, and that comes at the end of a chapter. I can read it to you.
Yes, please.
I am surrounded by love. My higher power guides me. I am protected spiritually. So that's one mantra.
Gorgeous.
And they can remove that from the book and put it on a fridge, on a bedroom mirror, wherever they like.
Oh.
And that at the end of each chapter is one of those. So this is on the chapter on going within. So we have what happened to me, how I used going within as a child, how I then used going within when I started recovering memories as an adult, and then exercises for the reader to do, the survivor to do, about their own journey with going within, and a mantra to follow. So I've got quite a lot in the book. It's an aeronautical theme. So you start with your boarding pass, and your boarding pass you automatically have as a survivor, because without realizing it, you've been aware of it, working on it, thinking about it since it happened. So you already have a boarding pass, and we traverse through the book and you end up with your travel itinerary and all of that, which encompasses some of the modalities within the book. So I'm quite proud of it. Survivors that have read it have reached out and said, oh my God, it's one chapter helped me. It's just amazing. And I also have non-survivors reach out and say, hey, is it okay if I use it too? Because it's actually working for me. So
right. It's incredible on so many levels. And you know, the fact that you've placed a theme within a book, and the theme has a destination. So there's another part of the brain that's focusing on that. It's just so brilliant. I don't even know if you realize how brilliant this is. Like in therapy, this is a masterpiece. So you are taking a survivor through a healing recovery journey when there is a slight distraction in a good way that takes them, on that aeronautical theme. And then the unconscious is even more open to healing during those moments. I have top to toe goosebumps. This was something that needed to be shared for definite. But you got them to, that's our angels bobbing back and forth. Woo! Yeah, it's genius. It is absolute genius. It is genius. I'm just so proud of you. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Now let's talk a little bit about coping mechanisms here. The different ways that we cope. I remember, myself being really badly beaten 14 years old, and it wasn't by my parents, but there was somebody who would take delight in beating me up, and you never said anything, etc. And one day I remember this person hit my head off the wall. They had my head and bashed my head off the wall, and I remember suddenly realizing that I was standing across the room watching this happen. And in that moment, I realized that I'd figured out how to leave my body when a traumatic physical event occurs. And then when I would come into my body, it would hurt like hell. But I remember realizing, wow, look at what I did. Look at, this is how I cope. Now, that level, I mean, all trauma like that is horrendous, of course. Everybody shouldn't negate their own violence that they've gone through. I wanted to ask you, did you remember any coping skills of your horrific trauma?
Oh, look, 100%. And I think what you're really referring to is dissociation, and it's one of our key hallmarks for survivors. That's one of our major ones, actually. So thanks, Danny. That's a great question. Dissociation works because I could not have stayed in my body and then had breakfast the next morning or got in the van to go somewhere with my father and or brother had I been present for the abuse. So my mind, I love my mind, and I'm grateful that it protected me for those years. And in fact, my 16 years of abuse was so horrendous, it took me another 16 years till I was 32 before I recalled and the memories started to flood. And the mind did that for me because I was ready to deal. If you said to me, were you ready to deal? No. Mm-hmm. No, I didn't want to at all, Danny. But my mind said, hey, it's time. And so they came through. But dissociation and my mind protected me, and I'm so grateful it did. It's too hard to be in your body and have the full experience of that. Sometimes for non-survivors, Danny, they get a little bit confused by it or don't understand it. So I put it like this. It's like having a bad or a car accident and you end up in hospital. You will not remember details of that accident for a little while. Might be days, might be weeks, might be months. Why? Because your mind dissociated and protected you from the trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Makes sense?
Absolutely, yes, and thank you again. Disassociation is absolutely one of the main key ways that anyone can survive a trauma, whether it's blunt force, physical, whether it's something they witness themselves, on so many levels. Thank you for sharing that, and again, to help other survivors out there to kind of find ways to healing. What else could you tell us about this book? You mentioned there are four main keys.
Four key areas. So I guess one of the sections, excuse me, caller, while I flip through my book. Oh, your book? Yes, my book. So one of their common symptoms, and you actually think you mentioned one of them. So the other common symptoms for us are shame, triggers, boundaries. We struggle to have boundaries. Doubt, we doubt ourselves. The 4Fs, you'll love this, Danny. It's post-traumatic stress or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, but I call them the 4Fs because it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn is our newbie, our new baby sister added to the trauma response family is fawn. And I was the queen of fawning. I was your gold medal winner, people pleaser, smiling, happy, what can I do for you, make your life as simple as possible. Fawn as a defense to protect against you hurting me too badly or being as nasty as you could be. If I could appeal to that part of a perpetrator that, through flattery, through accommodating, through being pleasant, then that was a trauma response I used significantly.
Incredible, incredible. Today with all the social engineering and the mind trauma and the mind washing, brainwashing, that's so purposeful, the torpedoes in governments running countries, those people that do what happened to you to little girls and to little boys, and you do, and we know who you are too. It's coming to pass that these unthinkable non-humans, they are infiltrating all of the school systems in such ways and putting filth in so-called books that are suggesting to the children that it's okay to go over the street to see your neighbor and your male neighbor, and in this particular book that I saw, and to get into bed with him. No, it isn't. On any level, on any planet, in any situation. Oh yeah, Bovid, they treat us like idiots. They meaning school governors, school boards, torpedoes to infiltrate the little ones. They use that time to slide filth. And half the parents are so traumatized themselves, like, get back to work, I'm losing my job, how am I going to pay the mortgage, all the distract. And these children have been filled up with this filth, this pornographic filth in schools. It is going on. Recently, a mayor in New York, he said to a school board and the school governors, when mothers came forward and said, oh my God, look what they are making our children read. And that school governor, that judge said, if you do not resign, I will fire you myself and you'll be arrested. Yes. So of course, they're all cowards. They're all torpedoes. Yes. Let me just put you back on here. Yeah, so it's been going on and most people do not know. They do not know what has been happening, but it's happened. It's happening, but not for much longer. Not for much longer. Goodness. So
that I read something recently I want to share with you, and it's this. By the year 2020, well, we're now in 2022, nearly 23, transporting will overtake drugs and weapons as society's most pervasive crisis. Now, that is research provided by the United Nations.
Wow.
So it is the biggest billion-dollar industry globally. So there's why there's empowered engagement and appeal and support for it, because it is such a money earner and people don't realize. Someone mentioned you can have a hit of H, which is a drug, as we know, but you can only do that once. You then have to go and find more. With the child X transporting, that child can be used many times as you like. So you see the billion-dollar industry, the greed, the narrative around it.
Yeah, the evil. And there's not one single way that anybody could justify that ever. But all eyes are on it. There are operations being taken down. and it
Yes.
will never be allowed to continue. And people think they're so clever and they're so smart, but you're really not. You're really not. And that was a mistake they made, assuming that nobody was going to do anything about it. People like you also. Incredible. It's interesting, again, using the phrases, the freeze, fawn. Another one that we use in therapy is flop, because some people, they just flop. And it's also called, yeah, it's also known as emotional paralysis. But yeah, goodness me. Did we cover all of the main keys in your book? I know we covered two. I don't remember hearing the other
Oh,
two.
no. I mean, and I guess, for survivors, because one size does not fit all, which is why I've made it that you can actually pick this up halfway through the book. You can pick this up at the beginning, or you can go straight to the end. It's your flight path. So at the very end of the book, we have your flight path and your travel itinerary and your destination details all come from the first few parts of the book. So for instance, Danny, if boundaries are an issue for you as a survivor, and you used things like music as a way that helped you navigate through your childhood, teenage years, that forms part of your destination detail. Don't you love it? So then there's some little exercises you can do with those. But it's just a way to navigate through. You end with passport, by the way. Would you like to see the passport?
Yes.
It's a survivor degree, but it's a passport. And it basically, again, it's perforated. It basically says this passport entitles the traveller to live the rest of their life in peace and harmony. This cannot be returned, refunded, or exchanged. The bearer has waited a lifetime for this trip. Date, name, survivor years, and survivor recovery, which is what they fill in. Oh, Jenny.
Sorry. Sorry, let me just stop this for a second. Damn it, where's the pause button? Okay, and we're back. So this beautiful survivor, Gloria Masters, was just sharing with us her degree. Would you hold that up again, please, so we can see, and read the words again for us?
So this is actually a survivor degree. It's the last page in the book. Again, it's made of quite thick cardboard, so it can be perforated and removed. And the reason I want to honour our survivors is this. This is a CSA, Child Sexual Abuse Survivor degree, and it's actually your passport. So you've now reached the end of the journey. This passport entitles the traveller to live the rest of their life in peace and harmony. This cannot be returned, refunded, or exchanged. The bearer has waited a lifetime for this trip. And then underneath we have a date, a name, because it's for you as survivors to fill in. The survivor years, so you put in how many years you've known about your survivor history and your survivory recovery, the amount of time you've spent on your healing. So that gets filled in and then put up on your bedroom mirror, dressing table, car, wherever you want it. But that's to honour you, my beautiful survivors, because of what you've been through.
It's so touching, so touching. The work you've done, the way that you deliver your angelic frequency, your voice, your vibe, the amount of thought and clarity and writing and clear exercises that you've created in this masterpiece. And it really is a masterpiece. And again, they can get it on Amazon, right? Barnes and Noble, etc.
I'd rather they came to gloriamasters.com because I'm trying to make a living.
Exactly. So
yes, Amazon, yeah, it's all through.
But honestly, stuff Amazon, stuff them all. There's bloody monopolizers. You absolutely deserve for everyone to come to gloriamasters.com to get the book directly through your website so that you make the money and the other flop-asses don't. They don't. It's absolutely the right thing to do. Can we talk a little bit about the work that you do in your handing the shame back, because I find this and found this to be one of the most powerful statements. Just the title, handing the shame back.
So let me share with you. Thank you, Danny. Another great question. My goodness. I created this YouTube channel, Handing the Shame Back, in January. And I did it because I realized it's the only channel in the world that is dedicated 100% to adult survivors of child sexual abuse. Every week I host a survivor on the show, and they share their experience, and other survivors watch and listen and either feel part of a spiritual survivor community, or something that survivor might have said on the show resonates. So the whole purpose is for people to feel not alone and to feel seen and supported through their journey. So every week there's a survivor interview. I also provide a blog every week. So my blog, being released on Monday, is on manipulation. Manipulation, you ask? Because survivors and survivor families and the adults around survivors were all groomed and manipulated so this could happen. So my blog is on that, and I do a speaking blog, and it's a written one as well. You okay, Danny?
Yeah, I'm good.
And then the third thing I provide on the channel each week are tips for supporting survivors. So therefore, the beautiful friends and family members of survivors who often say, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do. So click on to the tips, and I give them a few techniques on how to deal with the survivor in their lives.
And that's a massive part of everyone's recovery, because the people who are aware of the suffering of someone tread on eggshells. They don't know what to say. They could be using trigger words without realizing. It's such a stressful situation for everybody to be in, especially the survivor, but for everybody else, the parents, the children, realizing what's happened to their parents. Because I mean, now, in your 50s, this is 45 plus years ago that you.
I'm actually in my 60s, but yeah, it's we're going back 50 years, 50 odd years. But the point is this, it's a simple little tip, for instance, recently was on hypervigilance. And for friends and family of survivors, they don't realize, Danny, that for us, we enter a restaurant or a room or a party. How many people are in the room? Who's standing behind me? Where's the door? How can I escape? Who is it safe for me to talk to? So this whole hypervigilance heightened state is real to us. And again, it's one of the key components in the guide and the book, because I recognize it. It's not just me. Every survivor I know one woman who shared, Gloria, I don't go out for dinner unless I can have the seat with the back to the wall. Mm-hmm. That's hypervigilance, baby. Now, if you're a friend or family member of a survivor, you might think, why are they so controlling? Or why do they need to always be the one that chooses first? Hello, window. Here's some light on that. So.
See, this is brilliant. And this is what we need. We need this helpful commentary from you, so that people can be just warned, just have some way of delivering more kindness, more understanding, and zero judgment.
Awareness. Another one, Danny, if it's okay to continue.
Please, yes.
Is boundaries. And for us as survivors, our boundaries were brutalized and broken from a young age. Fast track to us as adults. In what realm is it possible for us to have good, solid boundaries with anybody? Nil, nada, no, 0, -2. So for the friend and family member, what you need to realize is we will often say yes when we mean no. We will often withdraw because we don't know how to say no. We will often do things that cross our boundaries, like have people over for dinner, even though you could be forgiven for thinking, but you don't even like those neighbours. So our boundaries are so skewed, it's really hard for us to say, no, I mean no, and stick to it, or yes, I mean yes, and stick to it. We tend to err on the side of overgiving. We tend to err on the side of not putting ourselves first. So these are all boundary issues for us. And as a friend and family member, you will be left feeling confused and annoyed at times because you think, well, you didn't really want that. Now I'm dragged into it too. It's because our boundaries are not working properly. Yeah, makes sense?
Yeah, total sense, total sense. You know, and also again, as horrific as this is, and the suffering that survivors in this realm go through, you know, it's also important for other people who maybe as children felt rejected and abandoned by their parents, but didn't suffer the physical trauma that you did. It doesn't mean that they can't feel sorry for themselves. It doesn't mean that they can't allow themselves to enter into some kind of healing, because there are so many different levels of trauma and disassociation and freeze, flop, or fawn, as you said. You know, this. So we must honor ourselves with the things that we've been through and not feel guilty because we're not Gloria Masters, right? Which is something else I know that you've addressed many times.
And that's it. Look, comparative, and there is something I do respect about Brene Brown, and she surfaced this. Comparative suffering is pointless. It's not a pizza. It's not allocated. You don't get